3 mornings straight. For 3 mornings in a row I went out for my usual walk through my new neighborhood, a rocky mountainish suburb where tall meadow grass spills over the sloped lawns of muted, earth-colored houses, and each time he was there, pacing up his driveway. Each morning, just after 7, I left my cul-de-sac, checked around the blind curve for traffic, and walked the ridge road. The autumn air was cool and the sun was climbing the distant peaks capped in snow. And there he was, a bony old man with that gross little mustache, dragging an ugly poodle behind him on a short leash. He always wore the same puffy winter coat, a wool-cap jeans and boots. He'd lift his hand and wave, but it wasn't a normal, friendly wave. It was insistent, almost frantic, as if something inside him had snapped. My arm felt like it belonged to someone else when I returned the gesture. Statistically, running into the same person in the same tiny stretch where his driveway met the street 2 mornings in a row was unlikely. 1 in 1,000, maybe. 3 mornings. Ridiculous. 1 in a million. Especially since I'd only moved from noisy, sweltering Denver 3 weeks earlier and hadn't seen the man until those exact days. Annoyed, I kept walking along the ridge, then turned and came back up the hill. Sure enough, he stood in the shadow of the ponderosis where my cul-de-sac met the road, his dog nosing the grass. He waved that same frantic wave again. My stomach did a flip even though I hadn't eaten yet. Why should an old man walking his dog bother me so much? Why notice it at all? Because of the way he felt, a nauseating weight radiating from him like heat off asphalt. That made me want to gag. I'm not skittish around people in general. I nod at the heavy-breathing jogger, smile at the kids waiting for the bus, acknowledge the 20-something in the red Jeep who races by after her late nights. But around this guy my body tensed without permission, like I carried a grudge my conscious mind couldn't remember. I always forced a wave back, but it took real effort. And afterward I felt gross, like I'd thanked someone for spitting at me. That Friday, I set my alarm for 6. There was no way he'd be up that early on Saturday. But at dawn, with deer nibbling the dew, he was there again, walking up his driveway. I crossed to the opposite side of the street out of spite, but I knew he'd noticed me. That heaviness settled onto my shoulders like a wet coat. I walked slowly, hoping he'd clear out before I got back. No such luck. He stood where he always did at the junction. Tired of pretending, I strode past him and ignored his wave. Halfway home, I spun and gave him the finger. He was gone. What the hell did he want? If he'd been any younger or stronger, I might have been scared, but he looked like a brittle old sack, easily handled. So the feeling wasn't fear of being attacked, just pure, creeping disgust. Sunday I waited until after breakfast to walk. Predictably, he was there pacing like it was the most ordinary thing, and I hated him more than I could say. I didn't even nod to Blondie in her Jeep as she flew past. Gritting my teeth, I hurried back and locked my doors. He waved at me as always, expressionless. On Monday I skipped the morning stroll and only left after work. He was at the top of his driveway, of course. That was when I snapped and called the police, breathless, telling them a creepy man was following me around the neighborhood. After a few minutes of trying to explain the seriousness of it, and them telling me that being overly friendly isn't a crime, I hung up, knowing they wouldn't help. I skipped walks Tuesday and Wednesday, and on Thursday I ventured out after dark. The neighborhood was quiet. I felt my pulse quicken as I neared his driveway. For once, he wasn't there. Then the sound of little paws scuffling cut through the night. Rage boiled over. "Hey, asshole!" I barked into the dark. The footsteps stopped, but no answer came. "I'm onto you," I told the empty air, the tremor in my voice betraying whether it was anger or fear. "You show up near me again and I'll beat the living crap out of you." I stalked off feeling oddly victorious, convinced I'd gotten the point across. I turned back at the bottom of the hill, half hoping he was waiting so I could finish what I'd threatened. I imagined knocking him over, shoving him down, landing a punch. I've hardly ever struck anyone outside schoolyard fights, but I felt certain I'd do it this time. The cul-de-sac looked empty in the blackness, and I felt a knot inside me unwind for the first time in weeks. Next morning, I was up at my usual hour, ready for confrontation, but the spot was empty. The old man's house door stayed shut. For the first time in a long while I breathed in the morning properly, the mountains glowing, the cold air clean. I'd left the city for this. A whole week passed with no sign of him. I felt lighter. Gradually, an odd guilt crept in. Maybe I'd been overreacting. Dogs need walks, maybe his routine just happened to line up with mine. Maybe the man was lonely, and the way I'd read his wave as threatening was my problem, not his. So on Sunday, feeling small, I decided to make amends. I'd catch him in the cul-de-sac and offer a friendly word, ask about him. If he was lonely, a few minutes of conversation wouldn't kill me. He wasn't there. Still, I walked up his driveway and knocked. A barking erupted from inside. Not the high yips I expected from that poodle, but deep, fierce barks. The door opened and a tidy 30-something man in slacks and a collared shirt stood there. Behind him a woman fought to hold back a snarling boxer. "Sorry to bother you," I said, feeling awkward. "Is the older man who lives here around? Your dad, maybe?" He blinked. "My folks live in Phoenix." Hers, maybe. I nodded toward the woman holding the dog. The man smelled of pine cologne. "They're in Denver." "Why?" I tried again, more directly. "Who's the elderly man who lives here?" "The one with the poodle." "You've got the wrong house," he said, puzzled. "We just moved in. We've been here almost 3 years." My mouth went dry. "Used to own the place?" I asked, forced to piece things together. "Yeah," the woman said. The realtor mentioned an elderly owner. Guy in his late 70s. "He's still around?" I asked, relief flooding in. "I thought maybe he has dementia, keeps coming here." The woman's face turned serious. "He didn't move. He died." I staggered backward. "No. You can look it up," she said. Winter of 2019. Someone was speeding and almost hit kids waiting for the bus. He shoved them out of the way and got hit. He died. The little dog died too. The world tilted. Stars swam in my vision. The boxer lunged, and the man slammed the door before I could speak. I stumbled back down the driveway, tripping over my own feet. A ghost. I had seen a ghost. I'd sworn to beat up a ghost. No wonder I'd felt that awful heaviness. The man had been dead. A cold prickled along my spine. What if he wanted revenge? Nausea rose as I stood in the cracked pavement. Questions rushing at me. Do ghosts exist? Is there an afterlife? Are they unfinished business or some widespread after effect? Had I seen other spirits and not known? Could animals be ghosts too? Lost in those thoughts, I didn't realize I was standing in the middle of the road until a red Jeep roared around the blind, curved toward me.